Tak nak kuatkan ni.
Buatkan video.
Dah aku
Dia
cakap
ada tulis.
Tak ada duit.
Not available.
Ada ni lah macam. Alah, macam mana je aku masuk phone ni. Gua pun tak nampak.
Ada apa? Alamak.
Apa benda?
Mulai. Benda
Pause.
Ya, pause je. Lihat.
Pasal
Bukan surau.
I kena ni je. I kena buatkan suara. Sekejap aku tengok.
Rami
Dah.
lah. Mesti bangun Ami ada dulu.
Min.
Yuk.
Oh, so macam
Yuk. Ami ada dulu.
Ambil ada dua.
Oh, tak tahu bukan aku lah.
Ambil ada dua. Ayo.
Aku
Atu cara caya raya.
tu nampak Aikal.
Apa?
Dia ada yang tekan kat video kan, dia ada macam
Mana?
ada macam alah speaker.
Tiga.
Alah.
Nampak speaker tu? Delete Discord. Mulia kali tanpamu kami cari saudara.
Macam nak kuat kan?
Kekuatan muda terlanta.
Bangsat tu.
Apa main dah?
Ya Google jap.
Minum air.
Mai dah.
Aku dengan ini, aku bagi host kat orang lain.
No.
Dah berdapat nasib lah.
Bon. Oh,
Maka hingga
Ay.
Menjelma percaya sesuatu di diam dada. Assalamualaikum untuk bersama.
Okay, semalam tengok guna phone kan?
Hah?
Okay. Oh, guna air. Bila phone.
pening siapa benda ni.
Okay. Itu orang tengok guna phone kan?
Guna phone.
Hang tengok benda ni. Guna phone kan?
Kenapa? Oh sekarang?
Video semalam.
Semalam aku guna phone.
Hang tahu macam nak kuat kan?
Aku akan pun.
Suara.
Okay, sekarang aku login menggunakan phone. Aku tekan join activity.
Kenapa tak? Esok je main GTA. Nah, depan dah. Kita satu bangsa, kita satu negara.
Kan? Kan bila kau dah buka YouTube tu kan? Kau tekan dekat video tu. Tekan macam kau nak full screen semua tu lah.
Saya full screen tak ada
Dia
Dia
ada
screenshot.
expand.
Dia tulis expand kan?
Screenshot hantar kat aku. Expand. Espanyol.
Ya.
Community juga ada. Kuliah. Pasal
So, aku nampak.
Yep. Oh tu ikan, bawah tu ikan. Bawah tu ikan. Oh,
Mana
bawah.
setting ah?
Sebelah play tu.
Tapi dia tekan ni tu. Tekan jadi mute.
Really.
Ya, aku dah guna flow aku ya.
Apa lah, tengok ya.
Pelawak.
Kau dengar suara aku kan?
Aku sekejap apa ni? Dengar.
Dengar? Batak dia sakit lah sikit tinggal aku.
Tak dengar tu.
Batak dia jangan dokal.
Agak.
Tak apa lah.
Agak. Tiada cara. Melainkan kau perlahankan suara siapa yang
Tak apa.
pilih.
Faham tak apa. Ya, tak. Ya.
Tak nanti kita orang mute.
Tak.
Tak dah tukar lah. Bukan aku, Ayi.
Bagi aku MVP. Bagi aku
Babi
MVP.
Ayi. Bila masa pula aku dah jadi ni tu.
Bagi aku MVP.
Tak macam mana lagi?
Kau tekan lah yang kat nama kau tu udah.
Ya kau. Ya kita tahu juga.
Oi, macam mana nak bagi dulu? Aku tak tahu. Siapa bagi aku ni?
Kau keluar.
Oh. Ada jumpa. Ada jumpa. Nak suara.
Allah besar lah.
Gila.
Kan memang pakai IT tu lah.
Okay.
Ada tak peminat
Ya.
brownies kat sini?
Ya.
Mesti ada kan.
Ya Allah.
Let's siap.
So guys, untuk cerita yang pertama, kita nak cerita tentang kalau korang kat asrama dulu kan, korang ni macam sakit. Korang dulu kat asrama, korang ni jenis orang yang macam mana? Maksud aku orang yang macam mana? Korang suka tidur lambat ke? Korang suka
Tidur lambat.
stay up ke? Korang
Tidur lambat
ke? Ataupun korang ni awal-awal dah tidur?
Apa beza tidur lambat dengan sit up? Tai.
Budak ni punya cerita, which is adik saya cerita ni, nama dia Zimi. Adik Zimi ni, dia kata dia pernah mengalami satu situasi di mana bagi dia benda ni agak menyeramkan lah. Alright, dia kata waktu yang berlakunya kisah ini Abang Acap, saya baru saja masuk tingkatan 3 awal tahun Abang Acap. Ingat lagi kejadian pada tahun 2018 ketika waktu itu saya menetap di hostel sekolah asrama penuh lelaki yang berada di Johor sana. Saya ni tak adalah kata
Nasib baik kalau dia kata Kuala Kangsar ni.
macam, tapi benda-benda macam ni saya agak risau lah bila terjadi. So saya ni ada masalah overthinking sikit. Dia macam ni. Okay, biasalah dekat semua asrama dia akan ada kisah-kisah urban legend. Kisah macam contoh hantu loka, hantu nenek kebayan dan sebagainya kan. So bila kita dah 3 tahun dekat sini, senior asyik bercerita benda yang sama. So kita just sangka Joy nak takut-takutkan Dan ni tak ada apa pun. Dia kata macam tu lah. So ada satu hari tu Cap, saya waktu tu orang kata apa berniat nak stay up disebabkan nak melepak lah dengan kawan-kawan yang lain dekat dom. Kita orang duduk dekat dom lain and main kad waktu tu. Saya ingat lagi. Okay, nak jadikan cerita Cap, tingkat asrama saya ni ada 3 tingkat. So asrama kawan saya ni berada di tingkat yang paling atas pada waktu tu. Okay, waktu tu jam dah pukul 2 pagi macam tu dah. Kita orang dah tutup lampu besar, lampu panel floor tu, and then kita orang duduk, kita orang sambung lampu USB yang kawan saya bawa, and kita orang duduk circle 6 orang. untuk bermain kad pada waktu tu. Kad biasa.
Oh,
Kad
apa
kita,
ni?
budak-budak asrama punya kad kan. So tengah-tengah main-main ni cap, salah seorang
Salah,
daripada
Rik, bukan
kawan
tu.
kami ni, nama dia Azim waktu tu, dia kata
Malu-malu.
dia sakit perut, dia nak ke toilet. So saya pun
Ganda saya pun.
kau nak
Ganda,
pergi,
Malaysia lah.
pergi cepat lah.
Ganda
Kita
Yoping.
orang tak lama lagi, jadi nak tidur ni, barai dah ni waktu tu. So Azim kata, okey tak apa, tunggu aku jap. So Azim ni pun keluar daripada asrama, and then kita orang 5 orang ni pun sambung bermain kad cap. Okey, tak lama lepas tu Azim ni masuk ke dalam dom kita orang, and then dia macam dalam keadaan yang tergesa-gesa and nampak macam panik. Tak tahulah kenapa kan. Tapi bila dia masuk tu, dia macam muka dia macam pucat, macam nampak something Dia kata, asal kau ni? Weh, tadi dekat toilet aku dengar ada orang nyanyi tu. Nyanyi? Ya tu. Nyanyi macam mana? Dia bunyi macam dia kata bunyi macam tu.
Weh, tak jam sikit.
Kawan saya pula kata si Azim ni ingat dia ni penakut segala kan, sampai dengar bunyi-bunyi macam tu tak. Waktu tu kita macam apa benda lah kau ni? Mana dah
Yang
nyanyi
scare.
malam ni? Ni mesti budak-budak dom lain lah ni. Saja
Memang.
kau ni.
Kenapa?
Tak ada lah. Masa tu aku tengah basuh tangan. Lepas tu
Ibu,
kat toilet
eh.
belakang tu semua pintu terbuka. Mana ada orang kat dalam tu? And dekat tepi-tepi tu pun tak ada orang. Tapi mana datang bunyi tu? So bila kita orang dengar kenyataan si Azim tu waktu tu, kita orang jadi macam ya kau? Ya. Uish, takut lah. Dah lah, abaikan je lah. Kita sambung dengan main kad waktu tu. So aku pun macam dia macam okay lah, whatever lah, main lah kad. Kita orang pun bermain kad sampailah jam telah pun menunjuk ke arah 3.30 pagi, macam tu lebih kurang. Waktu tu cap, saya dah mula rasa mengantuk, saya pun dah mula rasa penat, dan saya nak bergerak daripada dom kawan saya ni untuk balik ke blok saya lah. Sebab kita orang punya blok ni depan-depan. So saya kena balik lah. Tanggal besok esko saya tengok saya tak ada dalam bilik, tak pasal-pasal kena macam tu lah. Dia tak nak, orang kata tak ada cari masalah. Okay, pukul 3.30 pagi saya keluar daripada bilik tu cap. And bila saya keluar, okay, bilik dia macam ni, and then dia kena jalan ke depan, and tangga tu turun lah ke bawah. Daripada pintu tu cap, bila saya keluar, saya kata dengan diorang saya nak gerak dulu apa semua. Saya berjalan menuju ke arah tangga. And waktu saya sedang berjalan ke arah tangga tu cap, beberapa tapak lepas tu, saya terdengar bunyi orang menyanyi dekat situ.
Kudurah.
Jim, tak payahlah, ingat aku takut ke?
Kudurah.
Jam ke?
Malah aku layan kau. Waktu tu saya kata macam itulah. So saya mempercepatkan langkah saya ke arah tangga tersebut cap. Tapi cap, waktu saya berjalan ke arah tangga tu, saya tak tahulah macam mana ceritanya, saya ni macam tersadung ke depan. So bila saya tersadung ke depan, saya macam tersungkur lah sedikit kan ke depan. Waktu saya tersungkur tu cap, mata saya ni terlihat ke arah bilik air yang berada di sebelah kanan. And waktu tu saya ternampak ada
Dan pula jatuh.
hitam masuk ke dalam toilet tu.
Dan keluar daripada toilet.
Apa yang saya nampak ni? Uish. So saya pun bangun semula, and then berjalan ke arah tangga tu cap. Waktu tu laju gila lah. Memang turun tangga tu laju. Turun tangga tu laju, sampailah aras yang kedua, saya terdengar cap, tapak kaki saya delay. Tahu tak macam mana masuk dia? Dia tengah pijak kaki macam berlari. Tapi dia kata masa dia berhentikan langkah dia dekat tangga aras 2 tu, dia terdengar ada tapak kaki juga daripada atas sedang macam berlari ke arah dia. Waktu tu nak cakap apa, memang berlari lah saya ke bawah cap. Saya berlari ke bawah, tapi saya masih lagi dengar tapak kaki tu macam delay lagi. And bila saya dah sampai ke tingkat bawah, saya tak macam dalam keadaan macam adrenaline tu tengah rush kan. Saya tak tahulah kenapa beraninya saya ni pergi toleh ke arah belakang. And bila saya toleh ke arah belakang cap, saya tak nampak apa-apa. Tapi saya dengar yang tapak kaki tu makin lama makin dekat. Waktu tu boleh dapat tak perasaan macam mana kan? Bila sampai
Kau rumah dia.
dia dengar tapak kaki tu. Dan waktu tu memang dekat bawah tu jantung ni macam nak keluar cap. Memang letih, memang takut apa semua. Saya tarik nafas panjang-panjang. Saya berjalan lah, kuatkan diri saya pergi ke blok saya yang ke depan. Dan waktu saya berjalan ke hadapan tu cap, sekali lagi cap, saya terdengar bunyi siulan tersebut.
Sekejap siulan kejap nyanyian.
Satu saya naik ke tangga blok saya tu, and sekali lagi saya terdengar bunyi tapak kaki tu seperti sedang mengekori saya daripada belakang. Waktu tu berlari dah lah, arah saya pun nombor 3 waktu tu. Saya berlari naik ke atas, sampai ke atas saya terus nak masuk dom. And bila saya masuk dalam dom, memang saya menggigil habis-habisan. And kawan-kawan saya tanyalah kenapa apa semua. Saya cerita dengan diorang apa yang saya dengar, apa yang saya lalui waktu tu. And memang pengalaman tu saya tak boleh lupa abang Cap. Walaupun saya tak nampak siapa yang mengejar saya tak nampak apa bentuk dia, tapi itu cukup menyeramkan saya pada malam itu. So itulah kisah yang dikongsikan oleh Zimi kepada kita, guys.
Itu je. Itu je.
So korang ada tak yang ada patung mainan sendiri? Biasanya budak perempuan lah. Ada Winnie the Pooh lah, ada Doraemon lah, SpongeBob lah. Siapa ada benda lah tu?
Tak ada.
Okay, mungkin benda ni tak tahulah, boleh datangkan ketakutan. Dan kita pun orang Islam tak digalakkan untuk ada patung-patung dan sebagainya kan, betul tak?
Tak ada.
Okay, alright. So cerita
Itu patung kat belakang kau dah apa?
pelajar.
Patung basah, patung basah.
Dia merupakan seorang pelajar hostel Aspuri.
Gundam.
Yang ada di sekitar negeri mana? Negeri Sembilan. Okay.
Negeri.
Kejadian ini berlaku di mana waktu tu dia form 4. Dia ingat lagi, dia ni ada satu patung bear, teddy bear. Alah, biasalah form 4. Form 4 ni masa-masa kita bercerita gitu. Orang kata apa? Love monkey. Cerita monyet. Okay. Boyfriend dia bagi orang kata apa, patung tersebut. Dan dia kata waktu tu boyfriend dia adalah selet minyak wangi, untuk orang kata ngingat lah kalau kata baring-baring tu bila bau tengah bau B ni, contoh kan. Okay. Satu hari saya teringat di mana ketika saya dalam keadaan tak sihat. Dalam keadaan tak sihat, saya berehat dekat dalam dom, di mana yang lain waktu itu juga dalam keadaan yang sibuk sebab kita orang memang tengah on the way nak ke arah exam tau. So kebanyakan daripada mereka turun ke bilik prep untuk study lebih lama daripada biasa, sebab biasanya pukul 10.30 malam macam tu semua orang dah ada dalam dom. Tapi waktu tu saya memang tak sihat, pukul 9 lebih saya dah naik ke dom lah untuk berehat. Okey. Waktu saya tengah berehat seorang diri, ada seorang kakak ni datang tegur saya. Dia kata, Mi, ni akak nak tanya sikit. Awak semalam ada pergi mana-mana ke? Pergi mana kak? Oh tak ada, sebab semalam ada orang kata dia nampak awak tengah bersihkan teddy bear awak dekat ampai belakang tu, betul ke? Oh ada kak. Maghrib semalam, maghrib kau tak silap pukul 7.30 macam tu. Oh, okey. Macam ni. Bukan apa. Akak okey je. Awak nak basuh ke apa. Cuma lain kali air kotor tu jangan lupa buang lah Oh, sorry. Saya tak perasan semalam. Sebab lepas tu saya terus keringkan dia je. Dekat bawah tu saya macam tak perasan lah. Dia kata macam tu lah, sebab dia macam tak sihat kan. Okey, tak apalah, tak apa, it's okay. Nanti barang-barang awak dekat bawah tu awak clearkan Tak apa, air tu akak dah buangkan lah. Cuma baldi semua tu kat bawah. And awak ambil lah TDB awak tu dekat bawah tu. Menakutkan lah bila tengok malam-malam. Okey kak, okey. Sorry ya. Tak apa, it's okay. Alright. So bila dah dapat info macam tu, saya pun tak adalah fikir banyak. Saya pun bangun, kenakan baju dan sebagainya, and saya pun turun ke blok bawah Ashraf untuk mengambil teddy bear yang saya bawa basuh, dan saya sedang sidai dekat situ. Okey. Bila saya sampai dekat ampai saya tu saya ternampak teddy bear saya ni sedang digantung dalam keadaan terbalik. So saya pun tak tahu kerja siapa lah, sebab selama ni ataupun sebelum ni masa saya basuh tu, saya orang kata apa, gantung dia dalam keadaan ni, dia ada telinga kan. So saya gantung telinga dia lah. Tapi bila saya sampai tu dia punya kaki dekat atas, kepalanya kat bawah. So saya macam siapa buat benda ni? Tak baiklah diorang ni. So saya pun pergi kat ampai tu, saya buka klip tu and saya ketipkan dia dalam keadaan macam mana saya buat tadi. So which is kepala dekat atas, kaki kat bawah lah. Sambil-sambil saya nak kemas baldi yang berada dekat area situ cap. Okey, lepas je saya sepit saya punya patung tu, saya pun pergi ke arah baldi, berus dan juga beberapa perkakas yang lain dekat situ yang saya tertinggal semalam. Saya kemas. And lepas saya kemas tu cap, saya terus tak fikir banyak lah sebab saya pun dalam keadaan tak sihat semua kan. So saya pun nak naik balik ke arah dom lah. Tapi cap, waktu saya nak balik ke arah dom, lepas saya dah angkat barang-barang tu, saya pun menoleh ke arah teddy bear saya. Dan sekali lagi cap, bila saya toleh ke arah teddy bear saya dalam keadaan gantungan yang terbalik. Sekali lagi, padahal saya seorang je kat situ. Dan bila saya toleh tengok patung saya tu, kepala dia dekat bawah, kaki dia dekat atas. Macam mula-mula saya sampai tadi, saya macam siapa ni buat benda ni? Tapi dalam hati tu tahu, dan saya seorang sahaja pada waktu tu. So waktu tu saya macam bengang. And saya tak tahu lah apa saya cakap kat belakang tu. Apa yang saya buat waktu tu, saya buka sepit tu, saya angkat bear tu, walaupun dia basah sikit, saya letak kat sini. And then saya pun naik lah, bawa dia ke atas. So bila dah bawa ke atas, saya letakkan dia dekat tepi loker cap. Sebabkan dia basah lagi lah, saya tak nak letak dia dekat tilam kan, takut basah dan sebagainya. So bila dah letak dekat tepi loker tu, saya pun dah tak fikir banyak. Saya pun baring ke arah katil saya balik cap. Saya macam lebih kurang dalam 10-15 minit macam tu saya dah terlelap. Waktu saya tengah terlelap, saya tersedar. Saya tak tahu pukul berapa waktu tu. Tapi apa yang saya sedar, saya sedang nak mengalihkan badan saya ke arah kanan waktu tu. Daripada kiri ke arah kanan. Saya pun mengangkat badan saya cap ke arah belah kanan. Dan waktu itu saya terperanjat cap. Sebab waktu saya ke kanan tu, saya terbuka mata saya sikit. Dan bila saya buka mata saya cap, teddy bear saya betul-betul berada dekat depan muka saya cap. Waktu tu saya terperanjat lah. Mukanya tiba-tiba kat depan tu. Saya macam, ya Allah, macam mana boleh kat sini ni? Tadi ada dekat tepi loker. Lepas tu saya pun macam, siapa yang letak kat sini ni? Saya nak tanyalah budak-budak dom yang lain kan. Tapi tengok yang lain dah tidur. Sebab waktu tu dah pukul berapa dah. Diorang ni suka-suka lah buat macam ni. Terperanjat lah, tak suka lah. So saya pun bangun daripada katil tu. Saya angkat saya punya bear tu, basah-basah tu. Saya pun letak kali ni dekat atas loker cap. So saya pun baring balik dekat tempat pembaringan saya dan cuba untuk lelap. Dan waktu saya cuba untuk lelap tu cap, saya terdengar ada bunyi dentuman daripada arah loker. Which is loker tu belah kanan saya. Kedeng, bunyi dia macam tu. Saya macam, bunyi apa pula tu? Saya pun tolehkan
Ini sequel cerita semalam ke?
loker tu.
Teddy bear dan loker.
Dan bila saya pandang loker tu cap, saya perasan yang teddy bear saya tidak berada dekat atas loker saya. Sebaliknya, teddy bear tersebut telah pun beralih ke loker yang paling hujung sekali dekat dalam bilik tu. Saya macam, siapa ni? Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Waktu tu bulu roma dah mengemang dah. Memang dah takut dah. So saya pun tarik selimut saya perlahan-lahan cap. Dan waktu saya tengah tarik selimut saya tu, saya terdengar sekali lagi bunyi gedegang tu tadi dekat atas loker tu. Gereng. So saya pun tengok sekali lagi dekat arah loker tu. And waktu ni cap, saya nampak bear saya tu sedang macam mana, dia macam bergayut tau. Okay, ni loker. Kaki dia dekat atas, kepalanya dekat bawah. Macam tu. Kaki dia dah bengkok, kepala dekat bawah. And betul-betul bear tu sedang pandang ke arah saya cap. Waktu tu saya nak menjerit pun tak, rasanya dah tak ada suara lah. Nak bangun pun tak ada daya. Tapi waktu tu saya memang menggigil teruk. Sekali lagi cap, waktu saya menggigil, saya cuba tutup mata. Saya terdengar sekali lagi bunyi gedegang tersebut. And kali ni saya terasa dekat kaki saya tu ada something yang basah. Bukan saya terkencing cap. Saya cuba buka mata saya perlahan-lahan. Apa yang saya nampak waktu tu, teddy bear saya tu sedang berdiri dekat depan tapak kaki saya. bukan berdiri lah, tapi dia macam stand kat situ. Waktu tu saya angkat kaki saya ke dalam macam bersila. Saya menangis cap sekuat-kuat tidak lah. Sampailah ada seorang kakak ni tegur saya, dia tepuk badan saya, and saya menjerit waktu tu. Saya menjerit, tanah macam tu. Ui, kuat dalam orang bangun waktu tu. Saya diorang semua tersedar. Saya nampak diorang ni datang ke arah saya, dan saya menangis teruk-teruk waktu tu. Saya katalah kat atas tu. And pakak tu tanyalah kat atas apa. And dia tunjuklah ke arah, saya tunjuklah ke arah loker tu. And waktu saya tunjuk ke arah loker tu, dia pun pusingkan badan saya. Apa benda kat atas tu? Tak ada apa cap. Yes, memang tak ada apa-apa. Teddy bear kat atas tu. Bear apa? Tadi ada teddy bear kat atas tu.
Bear lagi kan aku buat bantul.
Akak daripada tadi dah bagi tahu awak, pergi angkat teddy bear kat bawah tu ke atas. Yang awak tinggal dekat bawah tu kenapa? Dah ambil dah. Mana dah ambil? Awak bangun sini. Diusung saya cap ke arah tingkap tu, ditarik tingkap tu, and then memang tingkat kita tu kalau buka tingkap belakang memang akan nampak ampaian bawah tu lah. Dan bila saya tengok cap ke arah ampaian bawah tu, teddy bear saya tu masih lagi tergantung dekat situ cap, dengan keadaan kepala di bawah dan kaki di atas. Waktu tu memang tak tahu lah nak kata apa, nak goyak ke apa. Waktu tu kaki memang lembik gila lah. Dan saya cakap dengan kakak, saya dah ambil petang tadi, barang-barang saya nampak ada dekat sini. Saya nak angkat dengan teddy bear tu. Tak ada dek. Tadi akak balik daripada prep, akak lalu dekat belakang tu, akak nampak teddy bear kau kat situ. That's why akak naik, akak nak bagi tahu kau. Tapi tengok kau dah tidur, so akak tak adalah kejut kau. Tak ada kak, dah ambil tadi kak. And aku melalak all the way long lah waktu tu. And besok tu diorang bawa aku ke ustaz, and ustaz sarankan untuk kita bakar je teddy bear tu. Memang sedih untuk bakar teddy bear kesayangan, tapi apakan daya, itu adalah jalan yang terbaik. Itulah dia guys, cerita yang dikongsikan oleh Mimi kepada kita.
Terbakar lagi fly.
Alright guys, so itulah dia cerita
Mana ada?
yang dikongsi.
Kau tahu naik kat belakang apa dia hilang.
Keadaannya macam tu. Gila. Cerita pasal hostel ni memang seram guys, kan?
hilang.
So kita ada satu lagi cerita.
Aku ada lagi
cerita ni simple and short. Aku nak share juga dengan korang. Okay, cerita tentang seorang pelajar lelaki, nama dia Amir. Okay, Amir ni Amir M-E-E-R Amir. Okay, dia kata benda ni terjadi dekat dia waktu ni, dia macam a short story je lah. Tapi dia kata benda ni kalau jadi kat kita, mungkin benda ni akan menjadi satu pengalaman yang menyeramkan sebenarnya. Alright, okay, nak jadikan cerita. Ada satu malam ni Abang Cap, saya teringat lagi pada tahun 2019 waktu tu. Saya ni seorang pelajar berasrama penuh yang duduk dekat salah sebuah college vocational yang berada dekat area Selangor sana. Okay, saya stay dekat asrama setiap hari hujung minggu cap, sebab saya ni berasal daripada Johor, Pasir Gudang Johor. So saya nak balik tu tak boleh macam orang-orang yang lain lah, yang di mana boleh setiap minggu balik. Bila balik pilihan, balik wajib boleh balik. Saya ni kebanyakan ni akan stay seorang-seorang dekat dalam asrama tu. Okay, satu hari tu, hari Ahad, semua orang dah balik. Bukan hari Ahad, Sabtu malam Ahad, minta maaf. Hari Ahad tu diorang dah balik-balik kan. Sabtu malam Ahad, saya dan juga kawan saya waktu tu, Iman nama dia, kita orang berdua saja yang duduk dekat dalam dom tu, sambil menantilah hari besok tu, di mana yelah kawan-kawan nak balik lah. So malam tu memang pisang habis lah Abang Cap, tak boleh buat apa sebab kita orang berdua je, dan kat yang lain tu pun kita orang tak kenal sangat. So kebanyakannya kita orang memang berada dekat dalam dom. Sampailah pukul 9 lebih macam tu, si Iman ni kata dia nak fly dengan form 5 yang lain lah. Memandangkan saya ni pun bukannya suka sangat nak fly ni, saya pun macam kau pergilah, aku malas lah, aku nak duduk seorang lah, aku bergatuk ni. Kau pergi Aman, aku nak tidur Aman. Dia kata macam tu. Kau betul ni nak tidur? Serius aku nak tidur, aku tak boleh lah. Kau pergilah, aku nak rehat je lah.
Aku gerak lu lah, ngantuk lah siap.
Okay man, nanti apa-apa beritahu Kau nak apa-apa tak? Tak apa, kau gerak lu. Alright, so waktu tu Cap, dia tinggalkan aku berseorangan dekat dalam dorm. Okay, short and simple, waktu tu aku dah macam nak mamai-mamai, nak terlelap macam tu lah lebih kurang. Tapi waktu tu aku rasa macam aku nak pergi refill air aku lah dalam botol air kan. Biasalah budak asrama kan. So aku pun angkat botol air aku cap and berjalan menuju ke arah orang kata apa, water dispenser yang berada dekat area asrama aku. Okay, dom aku ni dekat tengah-tengah tau cap. Water dispenser tu dekat ujung. So aku kena berjalan lah daripada sini nak ke ujung. Sampai je kat water dispenser tu, aku pun duduk. So aku ada bawa 3 botol aku, 3 botol standard botol air tu, and aku isi yang pertama. Sambil aku steady tunggu habis. Yang kedua habis. And yang ketiga tu cap, masa aku tengah duk isi tu, aku terdengar ada orang panggil nama aku. Amir. Saya macam Amir. Kiri tengok kanan memang tak ada orang. Kiri memang tak ada orang lah, sebab situ koridor and court of corridor. Amir. Jelas cap, saya dengar bunyi tu cap. Saya pun tengok dekat ujung dom, tak ada orang. Airnya tumpah. Alright, so dah settle 3 botol air. Saya pun angkat air tersebut and menuju ke dom saya. Saya pun letaklah botol-botol tu semua dekat atas meja saya, and saya pun try baring cap. And waktu saya tengah baring tu, saya macam tengyang-nyang lagi suara yang panggil saya tadi. Sebab saya curious dari mana datang pula suara ni kan. Dahlah saya sorang-sorang dalam dom. And saya macam fikir lalas lah. Saya malas nak layan lah. So saya pun tengok lah beberapa orang kata bahan bacaan yang ada kat situ. So waktu saya tengah baca ni cap, sekali lagi cap, saya terdengar bunyi suara orang panggil nama saya. Amir. Siapa tu? Amir. Bunyi tu cap datang daripada luar dom saya waktu tu. So saya tak fikir banyak, saya pun bangun daripada katil and menuju ke pintu dom saya. Saya pun buka pintu dom. Saya tengok kiri, saya tengok kanan. Memang tak ada siapa-siapa cap waktu tu. So saya macam apa nak main-mainkan aku ni? Aduh, aku pisang lah, malas lah nak layan. So aku pun tutup pintu dom, and then aku pun baring balik dekat aku punya katil, and aku tutup lampu dom tersebut. So aku pun layan-layan mata cap waktu tu. Sekali lagi cap, aku terdengar nama aku dipanggil. Amir. And kali ni aku dah hilang sabar. Aku pun terus jerit, janganlah nak kacau-kacau aku lah. Dia jadi bodoh lah. Orang malam-malam buta ni nak tidur. Amir kalau pang kau. Dia kata macam tu lah. Dia marah waktu tu. And bila aku dah marah tu cap, aku ternampak dekat aku punya tingkap tu, daripada luar tu macam ada cahaya bulan sikit tau, and ada cahaya koridor yang lain. Aku ternampak ada someone macam tengah melintasi ke arah
Dan ada bulan pula.
dispenser tu. Waktu tu aku dah nampak ada orang lintas. Aku pun terkejut daripada katil, and aku nak kejar orang yang duk kacau aku tu. Aku pun buka pintu dom cap, and aku berlari ke arah hujung water dispenser tu. And bila aku sampai dekat water dispenser tu, aku terdengar ada bunyi tapak kaki orang turun daripada tangga tersebut. So aku pun pergi ke area tangga tu untuk aku jengah. Daripada atas tu kan boleh jengah kan, tengok siapa yang turun kan. Aku nak cam siapa yang budak yang kacau aku. Memang aku nak cari dia. And waktu aku jengah ke arah bawah tu cap, aku ternampak ada something berwarna putih kecil, macam seorang budak kecil yang berumur dalam 3 tahun sedang mencangkung dekat tangga asrama aku sambil melihat ke atas. Kita orang eye to eye lah cap waktu tu. Waktu tu Tuhan sajalah yang tahu. Saya terperanjat punya, orang kata level tu memang tahan nafas lah. Macam tu. Saya nampak cap, dia kecil je cap. And dia berdiri tegak, dia pandang ke atas. Saya pun pandang dia. Apa yang saya nampak dekat tepi ni semua berwarna hitam, badan dia berwarna putih. And waktu saya tengah tengok dia tu, macam face to face tu kan, macam terkesima, saya terasa cap dekat belakang saya ni ada something yang sedang berdiri juga. Waktu tu saya tak tahu nak buat apa.
Ini aku rasa merasa tu ni.
Kanan tak boleh.
Apa?
Bila saya, orang kata apa, nak ke arah jauh sikit daripada situ, saya macam rasa badan saya ni tak boleh nak bergerak tau. Saya rasa macam nak ke depan tak
Yang
boleh,
ni
tak
aku
boleh.
tak
So, saya
terasa
macam
je.
kaku dekat situ. Saya tutup mata saya cap, and saya cuba baca apa benda yang ada dekat dalam orang tu kata otak, hati ni apa semua. And waktu saya sedang baca surah tu kursi waktu tu, saya terasa kaki saya ni dijongkit daripada bawah. Faham tak? Dia macam nak terbalikkan aku. Contoh, ni tangga, ni dia punya ni koridor. Saya berdiri kat sini, saya nampak dia. Saya rasa macam badan saya nak kena naik dah waktu tu. Uish. Waktu tu memang saya astaghfirullahalazim, Allahu akbar, Allahu akbar, Allahu akbar. And waktu tu saya terasa dekat belakang saya ni dah ringan sikit. And bila saya buka mata cap, dekat depan budak tu dah tak ada dah. So saya macam okay, relax. So saya pun orang kata mundur ke belakang sikit and nak berjalan menuju ke dom saya. And waktu saya berjalan menuju ke dom saya tu cap, saya ternampak ada something berwarna putih sedang melompat-lompat dekat bahagian hujung blok saya. Saya tak tahu apa benda tu. Saya masuk dekat dalam dom saya buka phone saya, suratul kursi waktu tu, dan saya orang kata selubung sampai besok pagi. Sampailah saya terdengar ada orang buka pintu tu, and saya nampak kawan saya tadi Iman tu dah pun balik. And dia pun tegur saya lah, "Weh, kau tak tidur lagi apa hal?" "Oh, tak ada apa. Kau asal berpeluh-peluh ni?" Tak ada apa. So saya tak bagi tahu Iman lah apa benda yang terjadi pada malam tu, sebab saya tahu dia ni penakut. So saya habiskanlah cerita saya dekat sini. So itulah dia guys,
Baik,
kongsian daripada Amir kepada kita. Uish, dahsyat. Kadang-kadang kan bila kita dengar cerita hantu ni kan,
Hantu
kita
merasa
macam
kat tu.
dalam filem.
Terasa
Kita
ke?
tak tahu dia punya beyond tu apa yang dia boleh buat,
Dia
apa
punya
yang
creepy
dia
je.
So itulah dia guys, kongsian kepada kita.
Pika.
Yang aku ceritakan kepada korang. So aku harap korang terhibur untuk sesi asrama untuk kali ni, dan kita jumpa di video akan datang insyaAllah. I see you guys. Sebelum video ni tamat, kita nak show dekat korang all my friends yang wishing me for 500k videos. Alright, so korang tengok. Kita end dekat sini. Assalamualaikum. Bye.
Hey Ash,
Skip.
kenal Ash daripada zero.
Ni apa
Sama lah
ni?
kita started from zero. We're still in the same journey, but you're already far ahead.
Apa
I'm
you?
so proud of you. Stay humble Ash, just the way you are. Sebab itulah
Stay
Ash.
humble, yelah,
And just be yourself, okay? And took this achievement lagi humblekan diri you, insyaAllah. Sebab I know you will go far. Okay, Seorang Ash will go far, and I believe in you. We always support you. Miharu will support you because as fellow creator kita sekapal. Thank you so much for your support too. Alright, so to Ash, congratulations for your
Ya, aku host.
500k. So jangan berhenti Ash, keep on going.
Lama dengan lagu India ni.
Tengok yang mana?
Apa ye?
Cerita-cerita aku
Meeting lah.
Cerita tengok aku punya yap.
Throughout my time here on YouTube, I've spent countless hours searching for dark, obscure content from all across the web.
Kau ni pergi kencing tak?
Oh shit.
Lepas ni pun macam seram kat ni jatuh ni. Kondo huru.
Ku dah berdarah kita. Main spam dia tu aku main tekan ni. Biodata. No. Delete. Profession, media star, nationality Dutch. 24 years old. Bodoh lah siap. Wih, betul. Dash, social media star. Hey, 54. Hey, color dan. Okay. Oh, shit. Shit. Kasihan Paditil ya. Ngantuk. Ting 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 ting. Apa dah hitam dengan biru putih lah. Putih color elegant oh. Color putih.
Kalau
Ay,
dah start kita tahu.
ngantuk ah.
Dah start.
Cepat tidur. Aduh
And
mak.
out of all my more
Okay.
Start.
findings,
Okay.
only about 1% of them have actually been turned into videos.
Apa
This
bunyi tu?
happens for a few
Ni ada
reasons,
footage
like
kan.
some of
Masa
the
ada footage
material
kan.
being just too
Ah.
disturbing or too
Footage and the
graphic to
dead
watch.
evil.
But mainly, it's because a lot of these topics I
Aduh,
found
sial lah.
don't really warrant a
Apa
full
aja ajak
at
tengok-tengok
least
eh.
not on my channel.
Apa benda?
So rather than just holding on to these topics forever, I decided to start a new series here and share with you all the chilling internet content that I've compiled throughout the years and will continue to compile for years to come. So join me in this new venture as we dive into the internet's darkest corners. Before we dive into this, I have to give a huge shout out to our amazing sponsor, Shudder. Shudder is the ultimate streaming service for all fans of horror, which chances are, if you're watching this video, that includes you. Shudder is essentially Netflix for scary movies, as it has the fastest growing selection of thrilling and dangerous entertainment. Shudder's expertly curated collection includes must-see titles like Vicious Fun, The Mortuary Collection, and PG Psycho Gourmet, plus all of the best horror documentaries and the hit Creepshow TV series from executive producer Greg Nicotero of The Walking Dead. As part of Shudder's annual 61 Days of Halloween, they have actually released the latest installment in the VHS franchise, VHS 94, which is by far one of my all-time favorites. It's seriously so good, I highly recommend checking it out. And now you can do so for free for the next 30 days by going to shudder.com and using my promo code Crowley. That's SHUDDER.com and the promo code Crowley to start watching for free today.
Iklan pun.
Hello. Fika masih nyanyi lagi ya?
It's been over 15 years since the premiere
Tadi,
of the now
tadi.
hit show America's Got Talent.
Aku dah perlahan
This
suara dia.
program centered around
Sangat
finding
perlahan.
the top entertainers in the country.
Wajar kau eh.
But despite the show's huge popularity,
Aduh, apa lagi
I
ni,
was
ini?
surprised
Dia
that
nyanyi
I
lagi
hadn't
ya?
heard about its upcoming
Ah,
spin-off,
apa?
which was
Dia
set to
nyanyi.
air
Ada,
fairly
ada,
soon.
ada.
The show is called
Tak ada.
AGT Extreme, which focuses solely on Daredevil
Tak, memang aku tak ada kat rumah.
News that has subsequently caused a bit of a stir online, as having a competition focused on extreme stunts means that people will
Tak
take
ada
things
dia
further
kurang
and
macam nak
further
question
to
tape
win,
apa.
which would lead to their performances getting riskier and riskier over time,
Macam
pushing the
go.
envelope and heightening the danger. With this in
Aku tak
mind,
dapat tidur
some
je, aku
critics
cari
have
kau.
called out the show for how dangerous it could become. And as it turns out, even before the first episode has made it to air, these critics may have already been proven right. On the 15th of October 2021, TMZ would publish an article outlining an incident that had recently happened on the set of the show. The accident supposedly involved 41-year-old Jonathan Goodwin, a man who had performed on AGT before, where he attempted other life-threatening challenges, all of which had gone off without a hitch, but this time was different. The article wrote, Jonathan Goodwin, a daredevil stuntman on the new America's Got Talent Extreme, suffered brutal injuries after a stunt he attempted went horribly wrong, and it was so bad, people on set thought he was dead. The article would then go on to explain the stunt that Jonathan had attempted to perform and how exactly it all went wrong. Goodwin was suspended 70 feet in the air in a straitjacket, hanging by his feet from a wire. 2 cars were suspended on either side of him, swinging back and forth. The stunt was for Goodwin to free himself from the restraints, and then fall on an air mattress and avoid getting crushed by the cars as they swung in the air. Then something went horribly wrong, and the cars smashed together, sandwiching Goodwin in between them. The impact caused the cars to explode, erupting in a gigantic fireball. Goodwin fell to the ground and hit his head. The article then mentions that Jonathan's exact conditions weren't known, but that his injuries had been incredibly
Combo.
severe, having to be airlifted to a nearby care unit. The scene described sounded absolutely crazy, as the stunt Goodwin had performed sounded unlike anything I've ever seen before. And following the release of this story, curious readers wanted to know more, as they wondered whether the ordeal was filmed, and if that footage would ever get released. But according to the article, this had happened on the day of rehearsal, meaning that there was no live studio audience, and the cameras potentially weren't even rolling. And even if the show had been filming, it seemed highly unlikely that they would ever choose to release this footage. However, as it turns out, during the whole event, another camera had actually been recording on set that day, which just so happened to capture the entire thing. It's unclear who was behind the camera, though many believe that it was likely a staff member who had pulled out their phone to film the act. And somewhat unsurprisingly, just days after the initial report, this very video would emerge, quickly spreading to practically every social media site across the internet. The cars are then seen colliding together with extreme force, as Goodwin is pinned between them. At that exact moment, the pyrotechnics in both vehicles go off, causing a massive explosion. Jonathan would then collapse 40 feet to the ground below, falling headfirst. The video is horrifying, and it's easy to understand why people on set thought Goodwin had perished, as every time I watched the clip, I couldn't imagine how anyone could survive such a devastating incident. But shockingly, Goodwin would actually regain consciousness that very day, and despite suffering serious injuries like 2 broken legs and burns throughout his body, he doesn't appear to be in critical condition anymore, as he's even taken to his Instagram page to let his fans know that he's going to be okay. His road to a full recovery is clearly going to be difficult. It's still amazing to see him alive and in such good spirits. Following the news breaking on this story, and the video finding its way around the internet, America's Got Talent has halted production on the show, and it's currently unclear where they will go from here. Though if they do decide to carry on with its production, I personally find it likely that this won't be the last time we see an accident like this. Our next story takes us to an obscure Reddit post made back in September of 2020. The story was told on the Legal Advice subreddit, as the original poster, or OP, was seeking help on a situation transpiring with their neighbor. OP described the situation as follows. I live in a duplex with my husband and my son, who is only a few months old. My father-in-law owns half of the duplex and is renting to us, and the other half is owned by an older woman and her adult daughter. My father-in-law has known the woman for over 15 years and told us before we moved in that the daughter was mentally ill and had strong delusions on occasion that caused trouble with the previous tenants. The last tenants apparently had to get a civil anti-harassment order placed against the daughter, but eventually moved out when the behaviors never stopped. Apparently, the neighbor accused them of kidnapping and abusing their children, as well as abusing their dogs. My husband and I brought our son home a few months ago, and we didn't have any issues with the neighbor until about 2 weeks ago. She has begun banging on and throwing things at the walls when our son cries. She screams at us as well, but I usually can't hear what she's actually saying, you know, over the screaming baby. And the 2 dogs going absolutely ballistic because of the banging. It's absolute chaos, and it made my postpartum anxiety so much worse. Every time the baby cries, I experience intense panic, waiting for the screaming and the banging to start. We have called the non-emergency police line twice when I can't handle it anymore and I feel close to a meltdown. And the first time they talked to her and she stopped doing it as often, maybe once every 2 days. Tonight she is back and it is worse than ever. The air quality is so bad right now from the fires that I can't let the dogs out for long to stop them from barking. And the barking makes the baby cry harder, which makes the neighbors scream and pound on the walls harder. The officer I spoke with says that we can try to get a civil anti-harassment order placed, but he knew for a fact that her behaviors never stopped after the last tenants had tried that. And he says his unofficial advice would be to live somewhere else. Is that seriously my only option? We can't afford to move, but I can't keep living like this. The post was met with minimal engagement, as many glossed over the story, not thinking much of it, and those who did respond seemed to have a mixed reaction. Some actually sympathized with their neighbor, as sharing a wall with a screaming baby would obviously not be a fun situation, and especially for someone with a mental illness who seems to react negatively to loud stimuli. While others found the neighbor's response to be fairly worrisome, as it was clear that the behavior had been escalating. But whichever side these commenters took, they all seemed to be in agreement on one thing, that there wasn't much OP could do, other than simply move out. And with that, the post quickly faded into obscurity with no resolution to be found, quickly being lost in the endless content of Reddit. But surprisingly, the story wouldn't end there. In fact, nearly 7 months later, an update would be made, thrusting what was once an unknown story into the limelight. OP's post read, "Update. Neighbor bangs on shared duplex wall when baby cries." My first post never got much attention, but the outcome was pretty wild. In October of 2020, my husband and I were renting a duplex where my father-in-law owned the half we lived in. We brought our son home from the NICU in August, and towards the end of September, the neighbor, 40-year-old female, started to pound on the shared wall if she could hear him cry. The pounding escalated over the next 2 months. The neighbor bought a megaphone to yell through the wall and threatened to rip us apart. She called us child predators, and she'd yell obscenities and threats until 3 or 4 in the morning. The police were called multiple times, but they responded that nothing could be done about it. One officer said, "I'm going to kill you. See, it doesn't mean anything if I don't actually do it." The elderly mother hadn't been seen in several months, but requests for wellness checks were brushed off. The general advice I got was that as renters we couldn't do anything. It was also suggested that this was reasonable behavior, since the baby crying was probably really annoying. Since my first post, we moved in with my grandmother for our safety. The neighbor ended up busting a softball-sized hole through the shared wall to scream at us, and occasionally just stare at us. The smell that came from that hole was indescribably bad. Our security cameras recorded her coming to my son's nursery window at around 2 a.m., almost daily, just staring and holding her cat. It took until the end of January for police to finally be able to enter her property. The elderly mother had been deceased since at least June, and the daughter had the corpse dressed in her Sunday best, rotting in a dead-bolted bedroom. The news article said that the mother died from natural causes. The daughter was taken to an inpatient psychiatric facility. The update came entirely out of left field, yet this lady's timeline made perfect sense, as the daughter's behavior likely escalated not just because of the new child, but also because of the loss of her mother. And without her mother to care for her and keep her in check, it allowed her actions to go way off the deep end, as by the end, she had clearly become completely delusional. However, this is Reddit, and with Reddit comes a slew of fake stories designed to go viral, which alone caused many to instantly write this whole situation off as a hoax. But digging deeper, this doesn't actually seem to be the case, as some would find news articles outlining a virtually identical situation. On the evening of January 29th, a welfare check was conducted at the home of 65-year-old Cynthia Newman. The lady had not been seen in months, and it wouldn't take long for police to figure out why. One article wrote, "The body of Cynthia Newman, 65, was found in a reclining chair with a pillow under her head and body. She was covered in blankets in an attempt to cover the body from sight. Newman's body was covered with insects and showed significant signs of decay, including exposed bone and places where skin was starting to peel off. It also appeared that animals living in the house had started to gnaw at the corpse." Also within the home was Cynthia's daughter, 41-year-old Jacqueline Bebout, who had been living with the corpse for over 7 months, never reporting it to authorities as she, quote, "didn't want to be alone." According to the articles written on this, Cynthia had died due to natural causes, though her daughter would still wind up being arrested on charges of failing to report human remains, with her sentence landing her in a mental health facility. But hearing this story side by side with these two threads, well, it all adds up, right down to the month that she claimed it happened. leaving me without a shadow of a doubt that
Jadi
this
betul lah.
was in fact real. And as I read OP's post once more, it becomes clear
Mana
that the strong
link apa
stench that
cerita
she
tu?
was smelling was the
Huh?
smell of a decaying body.
Mana cerita dia
In
link
this
apa?
context, what started as
Dia
just an obscure,
real.
forgotten post on
Ya,
Reddit
cerita dia tu tak tipu
has
lah.
now shifted into
Dapat
one
jumpa
of its
kat
more
Twitter.
twisted threads.
Gila.
Someone dies, it means they're not alive.
Reddit is home to a lot of disturbing content, and it's here that we find another thread, but this one
Damn corny.
requiring no context for its darkness to be understood. The post was made to ask Reddit.
Mana
where
lagi teruk?
user
Reddit
asks
ke 4chan?
Redditors who know how much time they have left, how does your day
Collab.
look like? The post proceeded to
So
go
collab.
viral almost instantly, as hundreds of people flocked to tell their stories, with all of the top results coming from those who actually suffered from some type of terminal illness. One user wrote, ALS rapidly progressing. Every day I get worse. Couldn't get my shirt on today. Not really enough strength and energy to eat, though I am being yelled at for losing weight. No pain, for which I am thankful, but unable to do most things we take for granted. I have T-Rex arms now, probably won't be able to walk or stand in the next few weeks. I am working hard to get the prescription for death with dignity. This is not how I want to live. I think I'll be lucky to make it to Christmas, more like early November at this rate. I don't want to live like this anymore. Another says, my days are a mixed bag. Some days I don't want to get out of bed, and when I do, I can't seem to find the energy to leave the house. I have tumors all over my spine, so when things go really bad for me, my legs will probably be the first to go. This is my time, and it took me a lot of dying before I could take a deep breath and let go of the stress of living. Sometimes the best thing you can do is crack a beer and watch some TV and not feel guilty about it. It's easy to feel like you absolutely need to make each day count, but if I'm happy, I'm happy. The examples go on from there, as so many users have come together to share their experiences, and it's interesting to see how all of their answers differ. With some, they preach positivity, and somehow through it all they have found their inner peace, while others, well, are clearly struggling to come to terms with what will soon happen to them. With most feeling guilty for what they have put their families through, and what their families will soon go through once they're gone. It's all just horribly depressing, and unfortunately, it's far worse than I described. As I've left out one devastating note, with that being that this thread is actually over 5 years old, and those accounts that had shared their stories, both good and bad, have now fallen silent, leaving the accounts responsible for practically all of the top stories in this thread abandoned, with no updates in years. This thread is no longer a group of people sharing what their last days will look like. It's showing what their last days did look like, as it appears that the vast majority of them are no longer with us, succumbing to the fate that they knew was around the corner. Leaving this as, in my opinion,
Ini
one of the
ibaratnya
most painful
website.
threads I've
Website bunuh
ever
diri
seen.
tu. Macam sama tu. Kau terkejut
It's
aku.
rare to see so many people know how their future is going to turn out and the fate that lies ahead. But most of the time, the future turns out to be far more surprising than you can ever imagine, which leads us to a website called airliners.net, where 21 years ago, a group of users began a discussion centered around an impossible situation. But for just a brief moment in time, they pondered it, with the subject line reading, if a 707 hit the World Trade Center. A user named MD90 starts the discussion by saying, when the two towers that made up the World Trade Center were built, they were designed to withstand the impact of the largest airliner of the day, the Boeing 707 Intercontinental. The Empire State Building survived a B-25 medium bomber crashing into it on a very foggy day. It was during the weekend when most people weren't there, but still, 14 people died. Anyone want to bet that the World Trade Center could survive a 767 impact? This post was met with the response, let's not try that, okay? One terror attempt was enough. From there, others chime in, with one adamantly saying, my bet is no way. Just imagine a fully loaded airliner the size of a 707 slamming into any building. Think about it. And the discussion carried on from there. One person wrote a rather lengthy, well-thought-out response saying, if a 707 or a 757 slammed into the World Trade Center, it might be much more damaging than the case of the B-25 bomber that crashed into the Empire State Building. It is very doubtful any passengers or crew would have survived such a grim scenario. Also, there are probably more people per floor in the World Trade Center compared to the Empire State Building, so casualties in the building will likely be much higher. Another user responds by saying the structure itself would survive, as the buildings are surrounded by other buildings, and thus only a hit could take place high up on the structure, meaning not at or really near ground level. If it could somehow penetrate and hit the base, that would take it out completely, but a hit 500 or 600 feet up most likely wouldn't take out the whole thing. Within this thread was even an employee who had been working at the World Trade Center at the time, who chimed in stating, I am working in downtown New York at the World Trade Center, and when someone is in the observation deck of the World Trade Center, you see planes approaching the LaGuardia airport, not far away from the building. Sometimes you think that the plane is coming to hit the building, and I always think, what if a pilot crashes a plane on us? The conversation eventually leads to someone saying, the scenario is really hellish. I think the flight disaster record, 1977, 582 dead, might get reset by a lot. You would easily have 1,500 or more, since you would have 200 in the plane, at least 500 in the building, and a real shitload on the ground. If the building managed to fall, there might be 5,000 or 6,000 dead. Oh well, that's why they put AC lights on the buildings. This was the final message written in that thread. A thread based around an impossible situation. A situation that could only live in one's imagination. Or at least at the time it was. Not even 1 year following this thread, 2 Boeing 67 planes would crash into the World Trade Center, forever changing the course of world history. The same planes that user MD90 had referred to when saying, anyone want to bet that the World Trade Center could survive a 767 impact?
Apa
As it
sedih
turns
ni dia
out,
merancang tu.
it couldn't.
And that's the history of the camera.
Dia rancang tu.
Tapi nya World
As
Trade
part of my
Center tu ni tu.
channel, I have a tendency
The
to
bomb
focus
alarm
in on disturbing
building.
videos and channels.
Sebab dia jatuh
Yeah.
semua.
Recently, I've fallen down the rabbit
Dia
hole
jatuh semua.
of another form of media, photographs,
Bapuk.
specifically
Dia
vinyl
kena langgar kat
photos,
atas
the
tapi
last pictures
satu bangunan
taken in
jatuh.
a person's life. And across the web, there are millions of examples of this, with an endless supply waiting in the future,
Oh.
as at some point, everyone will have their final picture taken, including you and I, whether we know it at the time or not. Many of the examples we can find today are heartbreaking or even inconspicuous, while others, well, are much more disturbing. On April 18th, 2021, a torrential rainstorm began to wreak havoc in Houston, Texas, along with many surrounding areas. The rain fell in excess of 24 inches within just a single day, flooding the streets and many of the waterways nearby, leading to roads being completely covered with feet of rushing water. And unfortunately for 21-year-old Darren Mitchell, he would be caught directly in its crossfire. After attempting to make his way home on Highway 105, the floodwaters quickly overtook the road around him, to the point that it was impossible for the car to move any longer, leaving Darren stranded in his vehicle at the mercy of the raging water that was rising quickly. And given the conditions of that road in particular, well, he knew rescue would likely be a long ways away. Before Darren knew it, the water had made it all the way up to the top of his car as it slowly began trickling in through the crevices. Growing increasingly helpless, Darren decided to call up his family just to tell him that he loved them, while also mentioning that he had managed to make it out of his car and that he believed he was going to be safe. Though sadly, this wasn't actually the case, as just minutes later, he would use his phone to snap this picture.
No.
He would then post the shot to Facebook with the caption, "And all I wanted to do was go home."
Oh,
Moments
bodoh.
later, worried onlookers would witness Darren's truck begin to roll before flipping over completely
Tempat tu
and
ada FB.
disappearing into the raging water. Darren's body would be recovered days later, leaving him as one of 5 victims to fall to this deadly flood. Another chilling final photograph comes from an ex-couple who had been partaking on a hiking trip in the Alabama countryside. 18-year-old Jolie Callan and her boyfriend Lauren Bunner had been separated for some time, but the two decided to head out on one last hike as a chance for them to come to terms with the end of their relationship and hopefully start a new and civil friendship. By this time, Jolie had moved on with someone new and was all set to start college, but she wanted to remove any ill feelings with Lauren as she began this new chapter in her life. Together, the pair traveled up the mountains in Chia State Park, where Bunner would chronicle the entire day on his Instagram page. He posted photos of Jolie walking her dog, as well as just taking in the gorgeous scenery around them, with this shot proving to be incredibly stunning, as it shows just how vast the woods were that surrounded them. Bunner would snap this picture before quickly posting it to Instagram as a way to cherish this memory, his last memory with Jolie. Just moments after taking the picture, Bunner would put his phone down and pull out a handgun that he had concealed in his pocket. He would then fire one shot in the back of Jolie's head, before flipping her around and shooting her once more to seal the deal. He then dragged her body to the edge of the cliff that she was seen here looking over, before pushing her off. Bunner was arrested that day after turning himself in, as it was clearly an attack done out of jealous rage, as he took exception to the fact that Jolie was moving on with her life, leaving him in the past. And it's likely that in this very moment, Jolie had no idea the fate that she was about to meet, and the plans that Lauren had for her that afternoon. But of all the final photographs that I found recently, there's one that I find especially chilling, as it just leaves so much to the imagination. On June 6, 2020, a group of friends had gathered at Frayant County Park to celebrate 46-year-old Biba Henry's birthday. As night started to fall and the party had begun to die down, Biba and her sister Nicole Smallman decided to stick around the park and continue the celebration, partying into the early morning hours. The two played music, danced, and waved around fairy lights, enjoying the day as if it was their last. And wanting to document the festivities, the ladies would set up one of their phones and begin photographing themselves. The phone was connected to a clicker that the girls would use to snap over 100 pictures, documenting their night in this dark wooded area. The pictures were a little grainy, and many of which were hard to make out, but it seemed as though the two were having a great time, or at least they had been, until this final photograph. It is incredibly blurry and difficult to make anything out, but the context behind it is highly disturbing. Just comparing it to the photograph taken right beforehand, it appears as though both subjects had been posing for a photo, before quickly turning to their left at the same time, almost as if something off camera had caught their attention, and even startled them. You can see Nicole Smallman looking to her left, and the body of Biba Henry turning that way as well. But besides that, nothing else can really be made out, which makes it all the more bizarre once it's revealed that this would be their last photograph, as the two would be found hours later, having suffered over 30 stab wounds, with their bodies being hidden under nearby brush. The two women had been brutally murdered. Following a lengthy investigation, it would eventually be determined that the two had been attacked that morning by 19-year-old Daniel Hassan, and his motive was incredibly bizarre, as he believed that he had made a deal with the devil, who had told him that if he sacrificed 6 people every 6 months, then he would one day win the Powerball jackpot. Daniel truly believed that the only thing standing in the way of him and millions of dollars was the sacrifice of 6 people, and so that's exactly what he tried to do. On the afternoon of Biba Henry's birthday, Daniel had seen their group in the park celebrating, and when the crowd dispersed to just 2 people, he decided it would be the perfect chance to perform his sacrifice. It was this moment, this final photograph, of the two seemingly noticing something on their left, that they would see their killer for the first time, as Daniel had just emerged from the woods, standing just barely out of frame, before he began his attack. In the year and a half since this photo was taken, Daniel has since been convicted of both murders and is set to serve a minimum of 35 years in prison, though I think it's likely that he will remain behind bars for life. And though the story is quite obviously a tragic one, we can at least find some comfort in the fact that Daniel will no longer be able to carry out the remainder of his sacrifices. The internet never ceases to amaze me with its disturbing content, as every day new twisted stories are being uncovered. So if this is a series you would like to see more of, then please let me know, as there truly is so much more to dive into.
GG dah Piro. GG dah Piro.
Atau terkejut aku ni.
Dah tengok aku nak tidur lah.
Aku dah tidur. Caw.
Mengantuk.
Semua caw seram lah.
Biar.
Ngantuk.
Sama. Ibu keluar hingus ni.
Apa?
Jadi ibu keluar hingus.